What is up, everyone? Gajewski here. Today, we are talking Louisville football ahead of the 2025 season. Before we get started, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. Those are a couple ways to really help a small channel. You'd be surprised how much even just a like goes towards getting this in front of other people, which is the goal for a small channel. We're going to be talking college football all offseason, doing previews, betting previews, as well as in-season game breakdowns when the season gets here. But let's talk Louisville. We are going to take a look at last year first, and then we will go forward with this year's roster. So, bringing up last year's efficiency metrics, Louisville had a top 10 unit across a lot of categories, which surprised me. I knew they were a good team. I didn't quite realize how good. Their weakest link as a team by far was their offensive line, and I hesitate to even call it a weakest link. Still a well above average unit, especially in run blocking. And then the skill position players were all top 25 in total efficiency. That's rushing and receiving. Found a diamond in the rough in Isaac Brown, who played awesome as a freshman. Tyler Shuck obviously gets drafted very high after this season. More importantly, the defense was 12th in overall efficiency. And their only unit that trailed somewhat was their pass coverage, where they sustained injuries. And they finished 34th. This was an awesome team last year, which makes sense. Jeff Brom has been building. He now enters year 3. Under him, Louisville is 19-8. They have back-to-back seasons of at least 9 wins and 2 good bowl games. Not to mention, last year, they beat Georgia Tech, Clemson, Pittsburgh, and Kentucky. They lost 4 times to Notre Dame, SMU, Miami, and Stanford. All of those games were by single digits. The only game that's not really excusable is the Stanford contest. That was just a weird game overall. But overall, playing against Notre Dame, SMU, and Miami close shows you how talented this Louisville team actually was. Offensive coordinator Brian Brom, he's been the longtime OC for his brother Jeff. He's basically occupied this position for a decade now at subcapacity, going all the way back to Purdue and Western Kentucky. But when the offense is functioning how they'd like it, I think it's going to be a pass-heavy offense. Sometimes they'll use 4 wide, but it's not always that. We've seen them morph into run-heavier teams. They did that under Plummer when he was the QB. But last year, pass rate was still pretty good. This is a team that is going to try to throw the ball over the top of you and get the ball to the number 1 receiver. So if 50% pass rate, what we saw last year, that's a good projection. It could be even higher. And it seems this year they're trying to take a pretty pass-heavy approach just based on the player personnel they've added. Defensive coordinator is Ron English. He's listed as the co-DC with Mark Hagan. Both of them are experienced on the defensive staff. They go back to Brom's days at Purdue. So this unit was shockingly good. I think the retention here in the coaching staff is a positive moving forward. The staff for Jeff Brom, now in year 3, wheels up for Louisville. Let's take a look at recruiting and talent acquisition before we go to the actual 2 deep. Recruiting is falling under Brom. This is more of a choice. He's a portal attacker. They were 29th in 2023. That's the final season of the previous coaching staff. They go to Brom full-time. I mean their staff recruited that class. Like Brom gets there late. That was Brom's first year coaching. He doesn't have his hands all over that recruiting class. He's able to keep them at first, but now the retention for that class is down to 31%. So they've lost a lot of guys from that 2023 class. Since then, the recruiting has dropped to 58, and now they're 68th this year. That's one of the worst marks in the conference. It's the second worst, actually. So now, what do we do here? You're relying on transfers, which is a strength of this team. They're 31st in this year's transfer class, 15th last year, 12th the year before. I wouldn't be surprised if they add a few more transfers in this class. We're recording this on May 21st. But it's at least a concern. They're not recruiting, even with some of their contemporaries in this conference. At what point is this a problem? It's another place I hesitate because Brom has been so good at developing talent, and we're going to talk about that throughout the show. This is one of the best coaches in the country at maximizing what players get on the field. We've seen a lot of starters come from low-level programs. Maybe they had some problems in a position starting, lost their job, and they come over to Brom at Louisville or Purdue previously, and he turns them into a player that can maximize their ceiling. We've seen this at quarterback multiple times. This is a guy that got Aiden O'Connell a spot in the NFL. We just saw Tyler Shuck get drafted in the top 50 picks. I mean, these are players that were not expected to be where they are today. And that's continually been a strength of the Brom regime. So I'm not going to fault him for the recruiting classes just yet, especially when he's attacking the transfer portal. But let's dive into the roster this year. A lot of change, but that's going to happen when you're a portal-reliant team. Too deep here. Transfers are in yellow. We have experience, the year they are in school, their snaps the last 2 seasons, and then we have their recruiting ranking in terms of stars, followed by a value score. Just trying to evaluate how valuable a player is. That looks first at the recruiting ranking, and then the more snaps a player receives, the more it values on-field production instead of recruiting. All the incoming players, departing players to the right of that, and some depth pieces below. But quarterback, they move on from Tyler Shuck. He goes to the NFL, and they add Miller Moss from USC. Moss started for the first time last year, former 4-star. He's 6'2", 205, completed 64.5% of his passes, 2,555 yards. That was 7.1 yards per attempt, 18 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 13 big-time throws, 12 turnover-worthy plays. So he is seeing those turnover-worthy plays converted to interceptions at a rate that's higher than average. That should regress positively. The only issue with Miller Moss is he does not have a lot of mobility. He finished with negative rushing yards, taking 9 sacks. So that's a little bit of a problem, but Brom is very good at scheming around those. We've seen him with non-mobile QBs. Actually, most of the time, the QBs aren't the most mobile. It was kind of an anomaly getting an athlete like Shuck last year. But anyway, he got benched. I don't think that was the right decision for USC. He threw for 300 yards on 4 occasions. They had a putrid offensive line. Again, he's not the most mobile guy. So when you put him behind that unit and you're not giving him a lot of help, this is what you end up with. I think there were other issues with USC that you probably should have addressed, and benching Miller Moss maybe wasn't the answer. But anyway, if for whatever reason Miller Moss goes down, they do have longtime backup Brady Allen. He dipped his toes in the portal, but he's back. He's a former 4-star. Goes back to Purdue with Brom, so continuity there. They also have a 4-star redshirt freshman in Deuce Adams. QB is in a pretty good spot. You never want injuries to occur, but if it were, you have a couple of 4-stars behind Miller Moss. Running back is in a shockingly good spot. After uncovering Isaac Brown last year, he's now a sophomore. A little bit smaller, 5'9", 190, former 3-star, but 1,173 yards at 7.1 yards per carry, 11 touchdowns, caught 30 passes, 25 runs of 15-plus yards, 33 yards of 10-plus. What an explosive back. I think ideally you use him in somewhat of a committee just because of his size, and he's your lead back. But put Duke Watson on the field for a few snaps to potentially keep him healthy. Use Kewan Brown in the same capacity because this is a deep position. 4-star sophomore Duke Watson, he was behind Isaac Brown, but he had 597 yards at 8.9 yards per carry, caught 5 passes. And then you have Brown, 47 carries, 243 yards, 5.2 yards per carry. He's the bigger back of the 3 at 210, 5 catches as well. This is a great spot for the running back room to be in. Behind these 3, you do have a couple other players. Jamaris Wilder is getting a lot of praise this spring, but I don't think we really see much of him behind the 3 guys up top. The O-line is different this year. I hesitate to say worse, but they did lose 4 starters, and that was a good unit that paved the way for these backs. But still, you look at the yards after contact, force missed tackles, these backs are efficient players, and this is a strength for Louisville. Wide receiver, they lose Ja'Cory Brooks. They do return Chris Bell, their second leading receiver. He's 6'2", 220. Been with the program for a long time. 43 catches, 737 yards. Perimeter receiver, played out there 93% of the time with a solid 1.79 yards per route. Wide receiver 2 should be former South Alabama transfer Colin Lacey. Got hurt immediately last year in camp. Only appeared in 5 games to preserve the red shirt. Caught 18 passes for 196 yards. Basically a slot receiver. Played there 95% of the time. 1.26 yards per route is not super efficient. However, this is a player that was injured and missed most of the development time you typically would need to succeed in a complex offense like Browns. Back with South Alabama, he had 3.14 yards per route, over 1,300 receiving yards. And the main thing with him is that he flashed. He was playing with Ja'Cory Brooks. He was playing with Chris Bell. And he comes back in the middle of the season to play in a few games. And then the bowl game, he's not the preferred target for Shuck. Obviously, that was Brooks. And he still flashed. So I think you can have optimism moving forward with Lacey, considering hyper productive in the Sun Belt. And then what we did see last year in spurts was solid. Now he'll have a full offseason to acclimate to the offense. I don't know who the wide receiver 3 is. They added a lot of transfers, and I imagine it's going to be one of these guys. Dakari Collins from NC State, TJ McWilliams, Minnesota, Trayshawn Hurry from San Jose State, or Bobby Golden from Akron. I think we can almost rule out TJ McWilliams. He's a 3-star redshirt sophomore from Minnesota. Doesn't have any production, but the others do. Collins originally was a 4-star with Clemson. Then he transferred to NC State. He's 6'4", 212. Caught 24 passes last year for 314 yards as a boundary receiver. This is a position we've seen Brom handle some reclamation projects that were high recruits and turn them around. We saw this actually last year with Ja'Cory Brooks, who wasn't able to get on the field at his previous stop. The offense with NC State, I mean, they had to fire their OC while Collins was there. Not getting on the field with Clemson is a different story. They have 5 stars, 4 stars everywhere in the receiving room. So I hesitate to say this is a player that's not talented and is locked into wide receiver 3. I think there is a ceiling because of the recruiting pedigree with him. I would say he is more likely than Hurry, who was originally a Weber State transfer, went to San Jose State last year, 6'2", 194, 28 catches for 478 yards. He's a perimeter receiver. His yards per route was 1.27, but for whatever reason, San Jose State only had eyes for McNash last year. So there weren't many opportunities to go around. And then Golden, 31 catches, 446 yards. That was his 3rd season with Akron before he produced. 5'8", 180. He played out wide 78% of the time, but I think he profiles more as a slot with this offense. I think it's going to be Collins as your 3rd receiver if I had to pick. The rest of the depth chart, pretty thin, but Sean Boykins is back. He played 5 snaps. Antonio Meeks, the former Tuskegee, transfers there. Chris Hughes has played a little bit in his career. I think the depth is solid because you brought in proven producers like Hurry, Golden, and then you have locked-in starters, Colin Lacey, Chris Bell, and I'm assuming Collins fills that out. The receiver room, maybe not quite as good as last year, but I don't think this is taking a large step back by any means. It still should be a very efficient receiving room. Tight end, they lose Mark Redmond. Nate Kuriski is the most experienced player. He only got 196 snaps last year, but he did play 440 the year prior in 2023 before they added Redmond in the portal. 30 catches in that span, 253 yards. Kuriski is 6'3", 240. Decent receiving skills, not a good blocker. That's not where he excels. And we've seen Louisville take 2 approaches. Last year, Redmond was almost an every down player, but the year prior and some other previous Brom teams at Purdue used tight end by rotation, which I think is more likely this year. So in addition to Kuriski, they have Jaleel Skinner, former 4-star from Miami, basically a big receiver. He's 6'5", 225, but he only caught 1 pass last year that was against Austin Peay. They also have Dylan Mesman, 4-star freshman. We'll see if he can, redshirt freshman that is. We'll see if he can get on the field more. I think the context clues basically suggest that Louisville was not happy with their tight end room because they have those 3 guys. Reports out of spring were not glowing, and then they went out and added Devon Mitchell from Oklahoma, CJ Jacobson from Utah, and Jacob Stewart from San Jose State. Mitchell is a 4-star redshirt freshman, hasn't played yet. Jacobson is a 3-star from 2023. He's also not played yet. And then Stewart, the San Jose State transfer, originally with JUCO. Last year, he played 427 snaps, 41st percentile production, but that was because he was so bad as a blocker. He's 6'5", 227, basically functioned as a big receiver, and he was fine if you just isolate receiving stats. The 41st percentile comes because he was terrible at blocking. So I'm very curious how they choose to compose this offense. Do they use more 4-wide stuff, but maybe use a tight end like Skinner or Stewart in place of a receiver? Something that could be looked at for the offense with the personnel they added. Offensive line, this is the biggest concern for the team. They lost 4 starters. The unit, again, was above average last year. Their lone returning starter is their center, former Northern Illinois transfer Pete Nigra. Started 2 years with NIU before coming in and playing last year. Very good starter, pretty good in run blocking, only allowed 15 pressures. At least that position settled. I have questions at just about every other position. Tackle especially after they lose Monroe Mills and Jonathan Mendoza, who are two of the better players on the team. They have a couple guys in-house that could start. Trovante Sylvester, he played 456 snaps last year, but ended up missing a few games. Former Houston transfer. His numbers were a little below average across the board, but we've seen Brom develop these players. Right tackle, Rasheed Miller played 289 snaps. It was mostly right tackle, but he also played left tackle. He played right guard for a little bit. Definitely a swing lineman. He had 1 year of starting experience with Georgia Southern before he came over. Average pass blocker with 12 pressures allowed. Didn't allow any sacks or hurries, however. Below average run blocker. And that is a trend you'll see with the rest of this group. The Brom staff is clearly prioritizing pass blockers over run blockers. From there, I don't think either of those guys are locks to start. They also have former Middle Tennessee State transfer and Houston starter Lance Robinson. He got hurt last year, and he actually hasn't played more than 42 snaps since 2022, so that's worth mentioning. But he has previously been a starter at other programs. They also added McKylan Pounders from Mississippi State, who a lot of people presume is going to be the starter. He basically was at Mississippi State for 1 year where he allowed 19 pressures. Again, worse as a run blocker. But his best play came with Memphis before he went to Mississippi State. I guess you're hoping the ACC is closer to the AAC than the SEC if you're taking a stance on Pounders. But again, we've seen production from players like this in Brom's offense. It's an excellent schemer. If I had to pick today, I think Pounders is probably your left tackle. And right tackle, maybe move Sylvester over. I'm not sure what they're going to do. A lot of these transfers came over in the spring too, especially the interior, which we'll get to. So fall camp is going to be very important for these transfers who were not here. On the interior, 6 guys come in. Jordan Church from FAU, Mohamed Musa from Purdue, Michael Flores from Old Dominion, Nair Jackson from FIU, Carter Guillaume from Illinois, and Sam Seacrest from Houston. I think Church is the best of the group. He played 739 snaps and only allowed 15 pressures. Also good as a run blocker, which is not the case for most of these guys. I think he's locked in as your best player and probably starts at one of the guard spots. Seacrest, he was with Louisville originally in 2023, took a break with Houston last year, only has 17 snaps. But the only reason I bring him up is he's an unknown, whereas the rest of the group we've seen, and it hasn't been pretty. So you're betting on Brom being able to coax additional play and additional talent out of them. He knows Mohamed Musa, who is with Purdue, who started for 3 years with Purdue, but he's never even played average. Last year was his worst season, 27 pressures, poor run blocking, came out in the 30th percentile. This is a bet on development. That's about it. Michael Flores from Old Dominion. He was originally a Dartmouth player before transferring down to Old Dominion. Started at center, allowed 17 pressures, but was above average as a pass blocker. His struggles came in the run game. He played in the 44th percentile with Old Dominion. I think he's your backup center, but maybe you could play him at a guard spot. Nair Jackson, he was a 2-year starter with FIU, but he has yet to even average, I guess, regular pass blocking numbers. Last year, he took a step back as a pass blocker, allowed 13 pressures. His run metrics declined. He played in the 32nd percentile with FIU. And Guillaume comes from the FCS. He was a freshman All-American, played in the 58th percentile, and registered over 1,000 snaps. He was very good as a pass blocker, poor as a run blocker. His game definitely needs work. He was a freshman last year, but it kind of is what it is. I want to, before we move on from the offensive line, it probably sounds like I'm negative on this group. First and foremost, this is an amazing staff at development. You can point to last year's group where they've developed a lot of players from previous programs and coaxed out better play. The one thing I'll say is I think the offense was coming from a better place. Like Pete Nigra had a year starting experience with Northern Illinois. Michael Gonzalez had 3 years of starting experience, all above average. Monroe Mills had 2 years of starting experience with Texas Tech. Austin Collins had a year of starting experience. Mendoza was a 3-year starter with Yale. That was probably the biggest concern. And last year, a lot of those players were from Power 5 programs with starting experience, and a lot of it average or above average. This year's group of transfers is coming from the G5 or the FCS, most of whom did not play average at their previous stops. I think they'll develop and be better. But all I'm saying is the starting point for the offensive line is worse this year than it was last year. So the ceiling they reach all comes down to Brom and the coaching staff and how well they can develop these players. I think you're looking at an average group overall, and anything above that, I think, is being very optimistic. It could happen because the coaching staff is so good, but it's going to be a stretch. And I mean, they lost guys like Collins in the spring. They weren't expecting to lose these players, some of them at least. Anyway, let's go to the defense, which was a strength last year and should be a strength this year. They lose their top 3 edge defenders, Ashton Gelati, Ramon Puryear, and Shermel Logan. That was a top 20 unit. They do have some players back, though. And man, 4-star Adonijah Green looks like the next stud for this unit. He had 20 pressures on 189 snaps. Clearly living up to his 4-star recruiting. Great place to start. Then they went out and added Clev Lubin from Coastal Carolina, Wesley Bailey from Rutgers, and Justin Beatles from New Mexico State. Clev Lubin was originally a JUCO player. He had 46 pressures on 442 snaps. Even in the Sun Belt, that's amazing. Solid in run defense with 44 tackles too. Great transfer there. Bailey only played in 4 games with Rutgers last year, but he started the 2 prior seasons. Best year, he had 32 pressures in 2022. He's been a solid contributor throughout his career every time he's been on the field. Beadle should be just a depth piece, never really played much. Had to transfer down to New Mexico State from Houston to get playing time. They also have Micah Carter back. He's a redshirt sophomore, got 5 snaps. The unit is not as deep as last year. Probably not quite as talented with like Gelati up top, but this is still more than above average on the defensive line on the edge. Inside, Louisville played a deep rotation last year. They do return Rene Conga, who had 298 snaps, and Jordan Garrod, who had 360 from that group. Conga originally came with Rutgers, amazing run defender, and he had one of the best pass rush win rates in the country. Small sample on the 298 snaps, but 24 pressures from the inside. Incredible. Garrod, he played 2 years with FIU before coming over to Louisville. Good in run defense, 19 pressures. They're a fantastic place to start. And clearly, they like keeping these guys fresh. So they go out and add Denzel Lowry from Old Dominion, Jerry Lawson from Abilene Christian, and Kendrick Gilbert from Kentucky. Lowry's a 3-year starter, elite run defender. He's a little smaller at 280, so that might be tougher in the ACC. Lawson was a 2-year starter with Abilene Christian, good run defender. And Gilbert is a former 4-star. He hasn't played a ton, but now you get a good recruit to bolster this unit. The defensive line should be very good. Maybe they're not quite top 20, but I don't think this unit is falling much further than, say, 30. It's a great D-line. Linebacker, they return TJ Quinn and Stanquan Clark, both awesome defenders. This should be considered the strength of the defense. Quinn's a 3-year starter, led Louisville in tackling last year, 82 of those, pretty decent in coverage. Clark was second on the team in tackling. He had 76. He's a former 4-star, even better in coverage, 2 PBUs, 2 picks. They also somehow retained former 4-star TJ Capers. He was in the portal for a bit, but they were able to coax him back. Only 33 snaps to his name. He's more of your sort of heir apparent. And then they also added Caleb Perry from Tennessee, who has over 200 snaps each of the last 2 years with above average marks. Started against Alabama last year and held his own. This is the strength of the defense. The secondary has a few questions. They have to replace Corey Thornton and Quincy Riley at corner, along with safety Tamarian McDonald. Their lone full-time starter that returns at corners, their nickel, Antonio Watts, 51 tackles, 2 PBUs. He was very good, and he was awesome at keeping receivers in front of him. Only 7.4 yards per reception, 1 touchdown allowed. That's awesome for the nickel. Maybe he has to play out wide this year. We'll see how that shakes out, because the rest of the room is probably coming down to transfers. We're talking boundary corners right now. They do have redshirt freshman Raymond Mosby, who didn't start the bowl game, but he played 62 snaps. He did allow all 3 of his targets to be completed for 83 yards. It was up and down, but that was his freshman season. So development is potentially there. They also added Jabari Mack from Jacksonville State, Justin Nagu from Louisiana, and Rodney Johnson from Southern. Mack started much of the last 2 years, slightly above average. He's a big corner, 6'1". 47% completion, 7 PBUs, and 2 INTs is awesome. Agu started last year for Louisiana, 58% completion for 388 yards and 2 scores, also had 7 PBUs. His biggest concern is the run game, where he missed 11 tackles, which was 21% of his attempts. Finally, Johnson started the last 3 years with Southern. I don't know what you expect from FCS transfers coming up. He's a backup in my mind. But not quite as deep. This position was very injured last year, so it's hard for me to see it being worse. I think at the very least, you have a stalemate. And the transfers are all from lower levels, FCS or G5, but you have so many of them. This staff should be able to piece together a corner room with Watts being a player you can rely on. At safety, they have D'Angelo Hutchinson back. He actually never started a game, but played 460 snaps, above average across the board, and actually pretty good in run defense. He had a 69% completion for 4 PBUs. The problem with him is he's more of a gambler. So you see the ball skills with the 4 PBUs, but 26.4 yards per reception and 3 touchdowns. You just got to work on the big plays, and your numbers are going to be a lot better. The other safety spots likely a transfer. They add JoJo Evans from FIU, Corey Gordon from Baylor, and Joseph Jefferson II from Purdue. Evans originally started with Kent State in 2022, started with FIU last year, played at Marshall previously. Elite in run defense. He had 93 tackles, 6 PBUs, 2 picks. He's a good candidate to start. Gordon was a rotational player for Baylor. He does have 1,712 snaps. Started the last 3 games for Baylor last year, largely just average there. And then Jefferson, he had a poor season last year, but that happened with a lot of Purdue players. Maybe Brom can fix him. They also have Blake Ruffin, former Eastern Illinois transfer. He was hurt last year, and he's been hurt in the spring. It's not quite as deep, but the secondary still should be good. And I think the defense overall is a very, very good strength of the team. Linebacker is the best position. D-line is pretty solid, as is the defensive back room. Louisville is going to break in a new kicker this year. You're going to see some combination of Nick Teller or Cooper Ranvier. Keller was on the team last year, kickoff specialist. Did a lot of that, actually, but only kicked 1 extra point. That was against Austin Peay. Ranvier is a 2024 recruit. He has a bigger leg, I think. He did make a 60-yarder in the spring, but he also had just 1 extra point last year. So I imagine this comes down to the summer. But one of those guys is going to be a new kicker. Louisville was pretty good on special teams last year, so hoping to continue that. Let's look at the schedule and see what we can expect this year on the field from this team. We have, there it is. Eastern Kentucky, James Madison, Bowling Green, and Kentucky, of course, in non-con. So 2 cupcakes, Eastern Kentucky, Bowling Green, James Madison, G5 Sun Belt team, but increasingly difficult opponent. That's definitely not a game that you just overlook, but Louisville is going to be favored for sure. Kentucky's the tough one at the end of the year. Kentucky's down, but it's the rivalry game. That game ebbs and flows year over year, and it's not going to be easy no matter what. At best, you could see 4-0. Worst, you could see 2-2. I think most likely is 3-1 with closer games against Madison, James Madison, and Kentucky. In conference, the schedule is much different than recent play. They've had relatively easy schedules the last couple of years. This year, they face the top 3 teams in the conference, Clemson, Miami, and SMU. They also play a healthy amount of the middle class, Virginia Tech, Pitt, Boston College. Easier games are against Virginia and Cal, and they don't play the 2 worst teams in the conference, Stanford and Wake Forest. So this is a tough schedule, especially with your non-con being not easy. Postseason expectations are going to be tricky here. This is absolutely a bowl team, but a lot of places currently have Louisville as the 3rd best team in this conference in terms of expectations to win the conference. I don't think that's where I would put them. I think talent-wise, you could put them number 3 overall. But, man, you got to play SMU, Clemson, and Miami, 2 of those on the road, Miami and SMU. Not to mention, this schedule does not set up favorably for Louisville. They have both of their buys in the first half of the season. They have to run through 7 straight games at the end of the season. I don't know who scheduled this, obviously their AD, but doing them no favors whatsoever with the buy structure for this team. And plus, none of their hard games are in that span. Miami, you play off a bye, which is great. But then you have to play Clemson, SMU, and Kentucky in 3 consecutive weeks to end the season. This is a tough schedule, man. But I like this Louisville team. They're going to be in a bowl game, I would imagine. Ceiling-wise, I don't think they're going to quite approach the 9 wins we saw last year. Looking, in my opinion, more at 8.5 as a good win total, 7.5, somewhere in that range. But thank you guys for watching. Let me know who you'd like to see next. Until next time, we will see you later. Good luck.